Welcome to episode 18 and the final episode of season 1 of the In the Name of Service podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Barb Thompson. Here we broadcast stories of everyday men and women who have answered a call to serve in hopes of inspiring and catalyzing the rest of us to follow suit in our own way. Today's interview is with Brett Crozier, recently retired Navy captain and operations lead for the California-based nonprofit Veterans Village of San Diego. As a part of his 30-year Navy career, Brett was the ultimate go-getter, his drive fueled by an insatiable desire to learn, grow, and improve. He graduated from the Navy Academy in Annapolis, became a helicopter pilot, then a fighter pilot, and a U.S. Navy nuclear power school graduate, and finally, the appointment that ultimately drew the world's focus onto him in March 2020, commanding officer of the USS Theodore Roosevelt, the most prestigious carrier in the U.S. fleet. That's when COVID-19 spread through the ship like wildfire, leading Brett to take steps that protected the lives of his 5,000 sailors, ultimately led to his dismissal, and he wouldn't change a thing about it. Brett is the ultimate paradox, a career military professional whose exploits led to the highest levels of leadership, but also a kind, gentle, and forthright human being whose philosophies on living a better life make him extremely approachable. In his book, Surf When You Can, Lessons in Life, Loyalty, and Leadership from a Maverick Navy Captain, Brett reflects on his life, career, and commitment to doing the right thing in a book that celebrates the power of kindness, the importance of teamwork, and the value of standing up for what you believe in. Through a series of captivating stories set all around the world, he takes us along the grand adventures of his extraordinary career and introduces the incredible people he met along the way. Among the unexpected lessons included in its pages are, when in doubt, be kind. Never turn down an espresso. Learn like you're going to live forever. Stand up for what you believe in, no matter the consequences. And, of course, surf when you can. I hope this conversation drives home the idea that anyone, and I mean anyone, can start right now making an impact in the world around them. For more information on Brett, his book Surf When You Can, or Veterans Village of San Diego, please see the show notes. Thank you for listening. All right, sir. I'm going to have a hard time not calling you sir, by the way, just because of my military background, but I'll try to call you Brett.
Brett's good.
Okay. Welcome to the In the Name of Service podcast. For those of listeners that may not know you, if you could just start us off by telling us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Brett Crozier. I grew up in California, joined the Navy. Joined the Navy to fly. That's really what I wanted to do. And then stayed ultimately for the people, but served for 30 years. Through that 30 years, I flew helicopters for 10 years. I flew fighters for the next 10 or 15 years, and then rose in rank and command until I ultimately had command of an aircraft carrier that had helicopters and fighters, and served on board the Theodore Roosevelt, and then spent another couple years here in San Diego on the staff, still flying, and finally just retired last summer. And now I found myself running operations for a large nonprofit focused on homeless veterans and veterans struggling with like drug abuse stuff here in the San Diego and Southern California region.
Interesting. I did not know about the nonprofit. Do you mind saying the name of it, or? Yeah,
it's called Veterans Village of San Diego, and it's we serve about 3,000 veterans and their families in the local area every year. So yeah, it's a good important work.
Wow. Going way back, I know you said you joined the Navy to fly. What initially led you to choose military service over maybe like civilian flying career? Or some other path.
So my dad was in the Air Force. So he went to ROTC at San Diego State and joined the Air Force. And he really wanted to fly. He was colorblind, and despite his attempts at like memorizing the colorblind charts and stuff, he couldn't fly, which is probably good. It was Vietnam at the time, and certainly it would have been a more dangerous career path for him. But that probably exposed me to military airplanes at a young age. I think I was born in Las Vegas on Nellis Air Force Base, so that's where the Thunderbirds are. And so I had airplanes flying around when I was a young kid, and that probably planted the seed. And so I actually that's what I wanted to always do. I just wanted to fly in the military because to me it was about being fast and loud and flying something cool. And all I knew was Air Force. But a little movie came out in 1986 that some people heard about called Top Gun. And so that, I know sadly I'm admitting that, but some of my buddies will make fun of me. But that opened my eyes to the Navy and the role of aviation in the Navy. And so I ended up applying to the Naval Academy. To be honest, I just wanted to fly. Like I would have gone right to flight school and I would have skipped college and I would have skipped high school, to be honest. But luckily there was adults involved in the decisions at the time and the recommendations were not to follow that because that doesn't work out. And went to the Naval Academy and that was got me to flight school. And I joined to fly. That's what I wanted to do. But I didn't stay for that. Like I said earlier, I stayed for the people and all the experiences and the places I got to live and the adventures I had. And I said I'd stay till I stopped having fun or the Navy kicked me out. And when you hit 30 as a captain, that's the Navy essentially says you're done anyway. So, right. But I had fun all along the way. Every single tour, I learned a lot. I had a lot of fun and there were hard days. Absolutely. And there was hard moments, but I had a really enjoyable time along the way with all the people I got to serve with.
Yeah. Yeah. You make it seem so easy. You joined to fly and then you flew. There's a lot in between there. I know that.
There's a lot. Yeah.
Well, since you've been out for just a tad bit now, reflecting on 30 years, which is almost impossible to say in like one single question, reflecting on your 30 years, you have had some time to do that. You've written a book about it, which helps process some of those experiences. Yes. What stands out now as having been the most meaningful thing for you personally?
It kind of goes back to the relationships I built along the way. I met my wife. We now been married almost 29 years. She was not in the service. She's a Navy brat, but I met her while I was in flight school. And that I met hundreds of people, that I learned from each and every one of them. So, in the book, it was me trying to tell stories, not just about me personally, but about the people I met and the people I learned from along the way. And to me, life is about relationships. Life is about your personal relationships at home, your relationships at work, or just the person you sit next to on the subway. I think there's so much we can all learn from one another, but you have to be confident enough to open yourself up. You have to be confident enough to be willing to ask questions you don't know. And throughout my career, that's what I remember. I remember sharing espresso with Luigi in Italy, or sharing tea with the Colonel Egyptian in Egypt, or the young sailor I met on the fantail on the Roosevelt. I mean, all of them collectively, I think, are what I really enjoy and remember. And it's writing a book, it's, written out is thought out, right? And so I did want to reflect on my time in the service. I wanted a way to thank everybody I served with, all the men and women I was lucky enough to sail or fly or fight with, or lead in some cases, or follow. I think I also wanted to share those stories in a way that resonated well beyond the military, because I think most of the lessons I try to capture or apply, whether you're in the military, whether you work at Starbucks, whether you drive Uber, or whether you work in the corporate world, or whether you work in a nonprofit. And that was kind of how my goal was, to share those stories and what I was lucky enough to learn along the way with a wider audience. And then also kind of just make sure people knew that, for me, I loved everything about the military. And for me, it's a family business. I had 2 of my 3 sons have served in the military. My father served in the military, and my grandfather. So, the Navy for me is a family business. I'm not in it anymore. I can grow my hair a little bit longer, and I can sleep in a little bit longer and surf more, certainly. But, but yeah, it was an enjoyable process to write it, and hopefully it resonates, and hopefully the story about that life's about relationships resonates with people no matter where you are, because I think that's important.
Yeah, I think it does. I knew when I just opened the book and read the names of the chapters that it was going to be so fun to read, and it really was. Also kind of a reflective question, but what do you think was most difficult for you personally? You can speak to a period of time or a specific incident.
Yeah, I don't know the specific time. I think collectively it was the time away from home. I grew up with a pretty close family and had younger sisters. we were running around. We always had sports and activities as kids, but we always took family vacations, and we always, my dad always came home from work, and I had a tight knit family and a group of friends. In my entire life, I think that I moved maybe once or twice when I was young and didn't remember, but lived in the same hometown until I graduated high school. So I think it was the time away in the military when you're having to say goodbye to your family on the pier, and you're watching all your sailors say goodbye to their families or their pregnant wives or their young kids, and single mothers leaving kids behind with grandmothers. That is the hardest part, in my opinion, about the military. And there was never a moment where I didn't leave, get underway, take off on a plane, knowing I'd be gone for a while. And kind of in your heart, you're like, this kind of sucks. This is the worst part. Like, I'm never doing this again. And then, this is the last deployment ever. And then, of course, by the time it's all over, I think you can really grow relationships if you do it right, with that separation, but that's never easy. And it's even harder probably in today's generation where we're so connected, with a phone and everything else. And although you can have connections when you're at sea now more than we ever did, you're still away. And so people, especially younger generations that are joining the military, that's something they have to go through, that they're, to how do you find those connections to make up for the ones you're leaving behind. I think that's still probably the hardest part about any kind of service is there's some kind of sacrifice, and it's generally the people back home that you're leaving, and you have to hope they're doing okay, and they do. I had a strong wife who actually ran things probably better when I was gone, but more structured, certainly.
Right. You do get into a rhythm, when your spouse is away. But isn't it interesting, though, that two of your sons decided, obviously it wasn't traumatic enough, you being away all this time and doing these great things, for them not to follow in your footsteps in some sense. So, yeah, although if you were to ask them, they might shake their head like, what was I thinking? Like, like right. I should have known better. No, they've done amazing things. And the oldest is already out doing other things. And I was proud that he signed up and did what he did. And my middle son is still in, and I'm watching that, you get to live vicariously through them. But yes, despite the 20 moves and 30 years and everything else and new schools for them, they somehow figured that was the path. And I think that's probably natural because it's also what they're most comfortable with, having watched me go through a career and always enjoy what I was doing and telling sea stories and flying stories. I think they came to get pretty used to that. Although my youngest son wants nothing to do with it. So I guess there's you got both ends of the spectrum. Right.
That's right. I'm like, I'm out.
Looking at, your military service, you served in a great variety of roles, and you went in to fly, but you did so much more. Leading, I'm just going to assume, was as difficult or more difficult than learning to fly and flying itself. But how did you continue to stay motivated all those years?
I think what's the thing about leadership, right, is when you find yourself in charge, so to speak, and you're leading larger groups, I think you become more cognizant of the fact that people are looking to you for inspiration. I think Napoleon said that leaders are dealers of hope, right? Meaning that if you want to be a strong leader, you have to be hopeful, you have to be inspiring, and you can't be inspiring if you're complaining about the Navy. You can't be inspiring if you're complaining about being gone, because they're all going through the same thing. So I always tried. I guess I took that to heart, and I knew that I was trying to set a good example, and even though I was sad to be leaving my family, I also knew that, I got 5,000 other people on board that are also sad to be leaving their families. So recognize that, but don't walk around and feel sad for yourself. Know that, you've got experience. You've done this a few times. Now is the time to be that dealer of hope, right? To be inspiring and tell them it's going to be okay. And it's going to be better when you get back and all that stuff. And so I think I found that as a leader, I was always inspired by the people I was trying to lead, which, whether they knew it or not, they were my inspiration.
Was there ever a time when you experienced some lows leading to burnout, or whether you question whether your investments were worthwhile?
I don't, I'm sure there were moments like when deployments were, you left on a 6-month deployment, and then next thing you know, it's 7 months, and then it's 8 months, and it's 9 months. And one of the ways you deal with separation is you start counting the days, right? You count the days the day you start, which means your count's up, whether at 180 or whatever for a 6-month deployment or longer. So there were moments, I think, when things changed, as they do in the military, and operations dictated, when those deployments became longer. Those were tough. But also when you lost people, right? There's risk to everything you do in life, and even more so in the military. And anyone that served at all knows the moments where you've lost somebody, whether you knew them or not. You served with them, and it didn't matter what the circumstance. That where it takes a toll. And those are the hard moments. I don't know. Again, I never felt like I was going to give up. I just knew that those were harder than others, particularly when, again, if you're a leader, it's really incumbent upon you to, you can mourn but you still got to motivate and you got to lead. So I thought those were times when, I don't know I would have done any differently. I just know that when you're in charge and those things happen, I know it takes a toll, no matter, because you feel ultimately responsible and ultimately accountable for what happens. So whether you knew that particular sailor or not, or the circumstance by which, he or she, might have got hurt or worse, that's what, that would, that affected you probably, or affected me more than other times, I guess.
Yeah. What do you think, practically speaking, are some of the things that you utilized to, I guess, you're describing a very quick bounce back or the ability to kind of see the bigger picture? But
yeah, I think, particularly in the military, there's this kind of stovepipe hierarchy and it can be very lonely at times. I mean, they talk about, there's no more lonely position on the ship than being the captain of the ship. That wasn't the case for me. I didn't feel like, I knew that could be the case. I think I can see why that happens. I always try to surround myself by confidence, right? Like my senior enlisted, my command master chief or the XO. And we, to the point where we got together every day for coffee, as an example, no matter what we were doing, to kind of talk through the day. But also we can let down our guard a little bit. We can, not talk with the rank you might feel forced to when you're outside walking around. And I think that strength, we call it the triad in the military, in the Navy, those three, the CO, the XO, and the command master chief, essentially the three people that are, influence operations and culture more than anybody else on the ship. So I think no matter what was going on, I tried to leverage that triad, those, whether I found myself as the CO or the XO, I knew that that was the team I needed to, when I couldn't call home and talk to my wife, I could talk to these two people. And even, when we had COVID on the ship, those are the three of us talked every day about what we were doing, what's going on. Or, earlier in my career when things happen or airplanes didn't come back, that's kind of the group you would talk to and that trusted group is important. And I'd argue any leader that finds himself lonely or finds himself in situations with no one to share, they really need to figure out how to change that, surround themselves by the right people they can trust and be willing to be open, because we're all, at the end of the day, human. We all have emotions and strengths and weaknesses, and we're always stronger together. Don't think just because you're a leader, you have to be tough all the time. Like, it's okay to open up in the right setting and help and get help, or ask people for, bounce things off or share, whatever the case may be.
Yeah. I have 1,000 other questions. You brought up COVID. I was, supporting a soft unit at the time, and every day was different. I mean, every day rules would change and regulations would change. And, but we were on land. We were not all, in close quarters, out to sea. So I know that people probably experienced on the news the sensationalism of everything that you went through with COVID, but that's an extremely unique circumstance.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, like the rest of the world, the military, the Navy was trying to figure out how to handle this. And,
exactly.
And information's changing, and folks just were making the best decisions they could with the information they had. I think it's important. Again, one of the reasons I wrote the book was to make sure and dispel any rumors or myths that I was angry at the military, or there's an assumption that I'd be bitter. For those that followed the story on the Roosevelt, at the end of the day, you just make the best decision you can for the right reasons. And not everybody you work for is going to have the same perspective. They're going to make different decisions, and it's okay to disagree. Mm-hmm. We should be respectful of one another. We should treat everybody with the respect from the experience they have. But I wasn't bitter. And again, like I said, the Navy is still a family business for us. So if I was really bitter, we would have done something else. We would have found a different thing, and I wouldn't let my kids join the military or serve in the Navy.
Yeah. I think it was just hard all around. So, but it's so neat to hear you say that, because even, some folks with some different experiences come away with a sense of maybe like the larger administration let them down. So I like your perspective on it. So your book, Surf When You Can, it's just that what we've been speaking of is a reflection of your life, career, and commitment to do the right thing. What initially catalyzed you to write it? This is your first book, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was a math major, so to be fair, I'm not a fast writer. No, I think it really was to kind of give credit to all the folks I served with, and whether in the Navy or the foreigners, the Italians I served with. And I want to just recognize and bring attention to all the amazing people that I was lucky enough to be on the team with. And then to share, there's so many great lessons I feel like I learned that I knew were well beyond the military. I knew was things that I had been taught by my mentors and leaders that worked for me. And I thought they were relevant beyond the military. I mean, and like we said, the military is a small percentage of society, but I think there's a lot you can learn from that small percentage. And because of the high risk environment the military operates in and some of the unique challenges, what works in that kind of crucible of high operational risk areas, I think works even more so at across the larger spectrum of society, whether it's business or nonprofit or education or you name it. So and obviously any aviator likes to tell stories. So it was an opportunity to tell stories and along the way, and that I thought it would be good to pass along. I felt like I learned a lot. I thought there were interesting things to learn, and I felt like I'd hate to just sit on them and not share them, and that they resonate with people and they can take them on board.
Yeah, it's interesting, I guess, from a reader's perspective, how often I found myself reading your words about kind of setting your ego aside in order essentially to learn each of these awesome lessons.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the military there's a certain stigma about the military that's all about discipline and toughness. And you have to be tough, and you have to be disciplined to be military. That's how we're good at what we do and what you expect. But it's kind of like philosopher, like Marcus Aurelius. You can be strict with yourself, but you can also be gentle with others, right? And I think for me, I learned the importance of discipline and adherence to rules and regulations, and we operate in that environment. But I also thought it was about, how you could lead in that environment too. And it's okay to treat people with that kind of golden rule, with the respect that you'd want to have. And so it worked for me, at least. I felt everyone's got to lead in their own way, and that you can't lead like anybody else other than yourself. But I think it's okay to be kind, to be nice. You can still be tough, right? You can still hold people accountable and have high standards, but you can also do it cordially, and you can do it in a way that people are inspired to follow or to do what you're asking them to do. Because at the end of the day, when the bullets are flying, right, it's not probably apple pie and American flag. It's probably the people you're next to that you want to fight for real, right? You're going to put your life on the line for, and that means you have had a positive culture, and it's that commodity of trust within that culture that's going to enable those folks to do amazingly challenging things, like sail into harm's way or, go into enemy territory when there's high risk. You wouldn't do it for any other reason. You wouldn't do it if your boss was a jerk.
Right. You might be, but
you might have to. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. But you wouldn't do it I don't think you'd do it as effectively. How about that? That's probably fair.
Absolutely. Yes. You talk about being deliberate about changing some of that old school culture from just basically everyone does what they're told and who knows what's going on the inside to this more like relationship based, having empathy and understanding. That sounds so much more complex.
It is. Yeah. Culture, there's no like script, right, or recipe on how to build the culture you want. And it's different for everybody. I think changing culture, like we were trying to do in that one case, is definitely challenging, right? Because you have people that maybe the other people like the old culture. Maybe they became to be successful in that culture, and now they feel threatened because we're trying to change something they're used to. And you can apply that to today's society in many ways too, why people feel threatened. They've succeeded in one culture. Maybe a new culture is going to mean that they're not going to succeed. But I think that's what makes changing a culture and changing the direction of an organization is hard, without a doubt. It's not black and white. It's also hard if you don't have buy-in from the top down. I've been in organizations where I knew the culture wasn't great. I knew exactly what I think it should look like, but I didn't have buy-in from the CEO or the CO of the ship or the squadron. And then it's tough, right? Because then every day is a battle, and you're like, this is not how I would do it, but I'm not in charge. So how do you support the person in charge? How do you maximize their effectiveness? How do you still take care of your crew without just throwing the towel in? And that is complex and hard. And I'd argue, I've learned that it's just sometimes easier to be in charge. Like when you're in charge, you can make things, you can change everything you want, for good or bad. Ideally, you've got a sounding board and people to help you along the way. But the hardest position is when you're not in charge and you know things aren't going right, and you're trying to make a change for the better, like a cultural change, then it becomes complex, and there's probably no one recipe for success there. You just have to kind of feel it out and build relationships and be patient too. I think that's the other thing, is big change takes time. It takes time to set, takes time to make sure it exists when you leave, which is the ultimate goal of any positive culture. But it definitely takes time and patience.
Yeah, you talked a lot, too, about the importance of building a foundation of trust through sometimes some acts that were they could have been sacrificial.
Yeah.
On your part, anyway. Yeah,
I mean, trust is the commodity of a good positive culture, right? And it's that same commodity that you cash in when you have to, so I always thought as a leader, when you have the opportunity to take care of your sailors, you let your team take extra liberty, like go to a major family event, like a kid's graduation, those kind of things that you can support operationally. That shows that you're treating people with respect. That builds trust. And then, and you don't do it transactionally. You don't do it because someday you're going to cash in, but over time that builds the trust you need. So when you have to say, you know what, we're going to have to work extra hard this weekend because of X, Y, Z, then I think if you've done it right, people understand that you don't do it all the time because that you're going to give them time when you can, or you're going to take care of them when you can. But there might be times when you have to cash in and say, hey, I really need you guys to work this weekend, or we've extended deployment by 3 months or 6 months, whatever the case may be. And that's when that is not the time to build trust. That's at that point, you're too late. Hopefully it's already there and you've got it in the bank, and you've built that and grown that to the point where, you can use that to help the organization get through those tougher times. Yeah,
I've heard it said that mission first, but people are the priority.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's hard go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I always said it differently. I always just said people first, mission always. Right. Meaning that we all understand the mission, but as a leader, you've got to take care of your people or the mission won't matter. So I used to try to reiterate that way. It's people first, mission always. I mean, we join the military understanding the mission. We understand when called upon, we will go and sail into harm's way. We'll get shot at or we'll shoot back on behalf of our nation. But so as a leader, since you don't generally get to make those decisions on whether you're going to sail or start a war, you better take opportunity to take care of your people. So when the time comes, they understand that. So I always try to say it that way. I guess people first, mission always.
Mm-hmm. It's playing the long game, though,
yeah.
But it's built up day to day. I've been able to see lots of leaders, again, say it first, like, of course, the mission's first, of course. But people matter. People are the mission. There's no mission without the people. But it's really their day-to-day behaviors that spell out their true beliefs about whether it's
I totally and I like that aspect. It's the long game, right? That's you're not just trying to run people to the ground and then spit them out and chew them up, spit them out and replace them. You can't do that. So you play the long game because in the end, life is more of a marathon, I guess, and a sprint. Particularly in the military, when we are always prepared and ready to go into battle and combat, but that day might never come. But you want to be ready when it does. Particularly, you think about where we are in today's world, we're training, preparing for some, always these major potential conflicts with near peer, adversaries. The day may never come. Hopefully, it never comes.
Right.
But you can't treat it like it's always going to happen tomorrow because you're going to burn people out. And then if it ever does happen, you're going to be left with people that just, maybe don't care anymore. So I think you have to have that long game view as when you're a leader in charge. And that's, again, military or the business world, right? Or your nonprofit that you work at. You've got to think of the long game, and that's probably always a better perspective.
Yeah. And sometimes it helps you see that what looks like a fire is really just a match, from a match. Well, what do you?
Yeah, I always just say, like, where there's no fire, we're all firefighters in the Navy, but I actually say in my current job in the nonprofit world, I say we are not firemen. Like, I don't want to run around always putting out fires. Like, that's, if we think it's a fire, we better be, there might be times when we have to react or call 911, but most of the time we don't need to react like we're firemen. Like, we can take a pause and look at this with the long view on how to best prevent this from happening again. And it's helped a little bit. Otherwise, it's just work becomes too stressful, right? If you're always just running around putting out fires, as they say.
Yeah. And then you might lose the focus on keeping the main things.
Yes.
Can you, now that you've told us a little bit about Veterans Village of San Diego. Can you talk more about just how you came to be in that organization and what you guys are trying to do for the world?
Yeah, so I retired last summer, and actually I started flying for a major airline. And through a tragedy, family event, I had a sister that passed away who'd been battling cancer for a couple of years. I took a long leave of absence from the airline, and through that kind of reflective period, kind of said, as great as flying is, and I go back to why I joined the military was to fly. Yeah. It was a reminder that I didn't stay for the flying, and I didn't necessarily want to fly the rest of my life. So through that, there's a large nonprofit here in San Diego, and some folks reached out to me to say, hey, you've got some experience running operations, and you understand how big organizations work. And so I started working at Veterans Village of San Diego. They've been around for 40 years and focused on, local veteran issues, particularly veterans that are in extremis that are homeless on the street. And there's several hundred here in the San Diego area, like many other parts of the country, and veterans that struggle with drug addiction and mental health. And we try to get them back on their feet, bring them in the organization, place to live, get them food, cleaned up, get them some treatment, counseling, and then try to get them a job and then back out there so they can continue to do great things. And so I find it rewarding. There's a lot of similarities in a nonprofit world to military service. You don't join the nonprofit world to get rich. It's about service, and it's about, you're rich in a different ways, I guess. You're not, it's not monetary, but you're rich because you do some things I think that are pretty rewarding. And so a nonprofit, generally, you're surrounded by those kind of people that are doing it because they want to make a difference. And today's environment where it's keeping up with the Joneses, or you look at San Diego where it's an expensive place to live, those that choose nonprofit, especially the younger generations that are doing this, and this is their first, their career path. I mean, my hat's really off to them, because there's no different than there is to sign up to go serve in the military. They are serving in a different way in their local community. And so as a leader, it's great because I have these people that are, again, they're doing it for service, for something bigger than themselves. And we're helping out something I'm familiar with, which is, veteran issues here in San Diego. So I find that, it rewarding. It's busy. It's hard work. It's, I'm home every night, but I'm busy, and it's, and some days it certainly conflicts with my desire to surf every day, but it's been pretty good work. And, I don't know that I'll do it forever, but right now I enjoy it. And I'm learning a lot as well about how to run a nonprofit and the business aspect of it, which is also equally important. But, so we do, we help out veteran families. I think we help out about 3,000 people a year as our current kind of number, veteran families that are struggling or veterans on the street, and, ideally making a difference. So, but it's that whole homelessness and drug stuff, that is a complex problem that, that there's no one easy solution to. It takes time, money, political will. It takes, public will, all that stuff. And none of that happens fast. So it really takes patience. And unlike in the military where you want to seize the objective and you want to execute your mission, in quick order, this isn't a hill you take. This isn't a ship you sink or a enemy you defeat. It's like this complex thing that'll certainly be around after I'm done doing it. But it's so all you try to do is make a difference every day and try to help out one veteran at a time. And I spend a lot of time at our main campus, and I usually bring a baseball glove or two, and I'll play catch with a couple of the veterans and just to hear their stories, because you realize, they all joined to serve at some point in their life, and then after the service, they fell down a hole, whatever the case may be, the analogy, and they found themselves in a dark place, and they all appreciate the chance to kind of the helping hand to get back up. And so that's that. I get accused of playing more baseball than other work that I should be doing, but that's one of my most enjoyable things is playing catch with the veterans.
It can't be more important than anything else going on. What have you learned from hearing some of those stories?
Everybody is different. Everyone's got a different story. In many cases, when they had these challenges and struggles, they didn't probably have the same network that, maybe you or I do, that, and so whether it's family, not everybody has a family around them all the time, or friends. So when they, found themselves in these challenging situations of living on the street or the drug addiction stuff, they generally just didn't have the same network around them. And it kind of just a good reminder that, ideally you're building relationships now so that if you struggle or think about people that might be struggling, how do you help them out so they don't get in those situations. It's the preventative nature. So all of them will admit that, it's, and again, mental health and drug abuse is much more complex than just a party gone wild and find yourself on the street. So they admit they have other challenges, but they also all generally admit that they didn't have the strong network around them. So when they needed help to ask for it. So now they are asking for it, and there are people out there to help, which is good, which is a good sign. I mean, them asking for help and willing to take help is generally the biggest and most important step in their recovery. So that's what we try to do, is provide that first big step for them.
That's so cool. All right. So I'm just going to ask you one more question, Brett, and then let you go. But I'm so grateful for your time today. On this podcast, I always ask the same question last, because I just love hearing what each individual has to say about it. But let's say there is that person listening to you. Maybe they wanted to fly, or maybe they saw Rambo. It's a different movie, different urge, but they feel some kind of call to serve, but they don't know where or how to get started. What would your advice be for them?
I would tell them there's a lot of information out there, but I always say that, I like to read. I look back at, books I read when I was a kid about aviation and the military. So there's an education piece, and that's, I'd say find ways to learn about it. That's either reading about it, not like find on TikTok a feed, but like read a book about it where you really get to learn about it. Find people that have served. And again, I think I look at service differently. It's not just military. It's also your local community. Find a way to volunteer. I don't know a single nonprofit out there that doesn't have a volunteer program or need assistance. And it doesn't mean it's as easy as just showing up. You have to sign up, or there's some other stuff required. But I spent every time I could during my 30 years in the military, if I had the chance, I would go volunteer. I'd do like Habitat for Humanity or feeding the homeless. And one, I helped me learn about my local community at the time, which was always in transition. Obviously, in the military, you're moving around. And two, you're surrounding yourself by other people like you'd serve in the military that are just there to help people. So I would tell them, read about it, ask a lot of questions, go share espresso with somebody that's been in the military. But also volunteer. I think there's a lot you can learn from volunteering, and that way it's not just military service, but it's a way to serve your larger, or your more local community, which I think is important, and which we need, I think, more people to do to address the issues at the local level, which is really where we can make a big impact.
Agreed. Yeah, and keep yourself open. You may just learn a thing or two.
And you might learn along the way, no matter what you do, I guarantee.
Yeah, awesome. Well, is there anything you want to leave folks with today before we conclude our conversation?
No, I appreciate the time today. Again, I felt blessed that got to serve for 30 years in the Navy and loved everything about it and learned a lot along the way. And I hope I can take those same lessons that I learned and share them for those that want to read the book, but also as I go forward in the nonprofit world for now. And I think that, again, there's one thing I learned through all that. Life's about relationships, and that means, meet people, talk to people, travel. You'll be better for it. You'll learn about yourself from it. And I think everyone could do more of that. And I think we'll all be better for it. And so, I appreciate the time today.
Thank you so much.